for good grades.
I wish I was better at relationships.
I wish I was an artist.
I wish I had a better relationship with my wife.
I wish for a life full of happiness.
I wish I may. I wish I might have the wish. I wish tonight.
Hi, happy Monday. Remember, if you're interested at all in finding out what a life coach does and how I could walk you through thought processes that you might want some help with from someone who simply just guides you with no desired result that they are invested in themselves, that's what a life coach does. You can find below the link to my free energy guide. And the theory is that if you can untap what makes you stuck, that will give you more energy. So look below for that. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about unconditional love. We had a discussion this weekend about unconditional love, and it's something that I have often wondered, what is it exactly? Because I have felt that because I was in foster care, because my parents weren't capable of keeping me, that must mean they didn't love me. And it's hard to move away from that, even though logically I know that that's not likely true. I fostered for years, and I tried to instill in those children the concept that their parents did love them. They just weren't able to change who they were. And I believe that. And yet it's really hard in a world where people want what we often think is unconditional love. I told my children when I was raising them that I will always love them, but I'm not so sure based on their decisions if I would respect them. And if I don't respect them, it's hard to spend time with them. And that was the closest I could come to explaining the difference between what we as people think of unconditional love. I remember one time someone telling me that they enjoyed having a pet because that pet loved them unconditionally. And I thought, well, does a pet love us unconditionally? Or does the pet love us when we give the pet what the pet needs? So we've all heard of or owned an animal that when we changed our behavior and the pet didn't like that change, they would pee on something that we liked, or they would act in a more malicious way toward us. And so I don't see that as unconditional love the way I perceive it. Some of the research that I did to kind of give me an idea of what I wanted to learn or to speak to was that what is unconditional love? And unconditional love is a selfless act that you're not in it for yourself. So if we think about our children, I don't know how many people can say that they had children because they wanted to build another human being. They wanted children because they believe in wanting mankind on the earth, and so they needed to do their part. There's a term that I've heard now in the world that we live in that's called a mini me. And that immediately feels to me like a condition. A philosopher once said that the act of familial love, being unconditional, becomes challenged simply when we say that we love that child because they are our child. And that immediately is conditional, that we love them simply and or because they belong to us. So what then can we do? So an unconditional love that is based on a selfless act of nothing coming back to us would indicate to me that our child could be anything, do anything, and no matter what, we would love them. And I think there are people who say, I do love my difficult child. And we do love our difficult children, not just the children who do everything correctly the way we would like. But would love not then mean that we can interact and have relationship with those people? And so then that's where the waters can become a little muddy. When we think of relationship, we think of boundaries, we think of needs. And so if I have needs and you can't meet my need, I would think if you love me, you would at least offer to help me meet those needs. And so, in effect, you're giving me what I need. But I think when we get into relationship, people feel that you, my other person, that it's their responsibility to somehow help me or make me be my best person. And we've shifted a little bit. We used to say things like we each need to bring 50%, and now we say things like we each need to bring 100%. We say that this person completes me, and now people are saying we shouldn't say that. We should be complete in our own right, and then two completes make a whole. So we're learning a little bit more as we move through how we've maybe thought differently about parts of this unconditional love, as we call it. Unconditional love, the idea that I can make a mistake and you'll still love me, that is certainly something we all would love to have, but it's going to depend on the intensity of the mistake. It's going to depend on the repetition of the mistake as to how altruistic we can be around this unconditional love, this concept that we have love for another person so much so that it doesn't matter what they do because we're not loving them for any benefit to ourselves. And I think on some level, when we do love, we have a sense that I was going to say we have a sense that it brings to us the joy of loving. So then that is altruistic, or but it's like you're not in it for yourself. So if loving something benefits you, then is it truly unconditional? And we could probably debate this for a while. And so then what is it that we want to strive for? Well, maybe what we want to strive for is just more awareness of love being an ingredient of all things that we do, that it does bring us joy, that we do love people we can't be with. If you think of neglectful relationships because that person can't meet their needs, and them not having what they need breaks down what they can give. And so we may need to move on from a relationship like that. But in the process of moving on, we still have forgiveness or we still have love for that person. So you could surmise that the moving on is the unconditional love. And yet that's not how we typically think of unconditional love. So they've done studies. A small study done indicated that the brain regions activated by feelings of unconditional love showed that people had more positive feelings. They felt better about themselves. They had more autonomy, those kinds of things. Unconditional love makes people feel secure. The idea that if you love me no matter what, I don't have to live in fear that that love will disappear. And so I think that's the draw. That's why people want that so much. And yet we've joked in our household a lot about what does love really mean when we say things like, I love spaghetti. And the very next day we tell our child, I love you. Does our child think they love me like spaghetti? So it's challenging to think about love in those respects. So if we think about acceptance and forgiveness, people aren't perfect. People often do things they regret. And so if you forgive mistakes and continue to offer your love, then the mistake doesn't cause them as much distress or harm. In the article that I read about this, it says that you can't love someone unconditionally unless your love remains unchanged despite their actions. You can, however, love someone unconditionally without having a relationship with them. And so that makes conflicting comments or thought processes. So acceptance sometimes involves recognizing when it's unlikely someone will change and taking steps to protect your own well-being. And so should we give up on love? No, everybody seeks it. Everybody wants it. So what is it not would be the other thing. And so ignoring relationship issues. When there are issues, we don't ignore them because somehow we think that that tampers with unconditional love. Conflict is normal and healthy. We need to have that. So, depending on the circumstances, you might agree to work on something together, rebuild the trust, or rebuild money if someone spent more than they should have. Um, and if those things don't work, then you can, walk away from situations and still have love in your heart. And yet people would say someone who walks away doesn't love unconditionally. You do not neglect your own needs, which I already spoke about. You don't tolerate abuse. You don't tolerate um, things that cause you to be less than you are. And so, familial, so family love, we think of as unconditional in some aspects because we share a name, because we share history, and we think that that's what unconditional love means. But unconditional love, well, it's easier to have in a family because we believe those things. Romantically, it may be harder to come to terms with what we consider unconditional love. So I just wanted to, it's Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada, and I want to give people a sense that love is a feeling that we have when we give it without expecting anything back. And we give it because it empowers us in a way that helps us. And if we can think about how we are irritated by family, or how we are uplifted by family, or how we want to build our children, our human beings that we've brought into the world, we can look at love differently, and we can consider some of these things in a different light and understand that it's not that simplistic, and that's why it's challenging, and that's why people feel like maybe they don't have unconditional love. um, Love changes. Love, the feeling that you have about being in a relationship, whether it's with your children or a romantic partner, that connection that we enjoy is not just love on its own, because what we enjoy in the early days changes, and what we enjoy with a toddler is different than a teen. And so it isn't so simplistic, and we need to be open to understanding that we have a love and we can build more, and we don't give it to hold it over someone's head or to expect things in return. But we are able to love and yet not be with somebody. We are able to love and not be able to stay with somebody. So if distance is an issue, we can build that. If we have to separate permanently, we can forgive and yet still have love. So I just wanted to bring that to an awareness level of what we need to consider and think about on a romantic level versus on a family level, and to see what it is that we think we want to change in our thinking around that, so that maybe we would feel more content in the connections that we have with people. And that would make all of the times that we get together easier for all of us. So I hope that made any sense. I feel like I rambled a bit, and yet unconditional love is something I've often thought about and wondered what it meant, because I felt like I could always consider the love that I have met as having conditions. And I think the tiebreaker on that is that the conditions feel like conditions when we're expecting more of it to complete ourselves versus something that we give.
As much as I enjoy discussions, I also want to provide a service to people who would like more. If you want to do more than listen, get in touch with me with the links in the description. You can also email me through hello@beyondwishfulthinking.ca. And I'd like to give you content you enjoy, so please leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're watching through my YouTube channel, leave your comments below. If you want more of Beyond Wishful Thinking podcasts, make sure to subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you are listening right now.